Allan Coleman, Widnes defeat to Barrow. Was that even worse than last week?
Yeah, I'd say so, and that's not being disrespectful to Barrow. Obviously, you look at York's done. I think they've won 66-0 today against Doncaster. They're a top side Yorker. I'm not saying Barrow aren't, but when you're home games, you should be winning home games in this competition. You've got to win home games. I just thought they run harder, tackle better, and wanted it more than us today, and that's disappointing for me.
Yeah, and you've not had many home games this season either, so probably doubly frustrating that you served that up in front of our own fans.
Yeah, especially after last week. We all agreed as a group it's not acceptable and we've got to change things, and we've not changed it. So for me, I've got to question them boys now, because I wanted a reaction. They're not giving me one, and I want to know why. We've just had a bit of a chat in there now, and last year we said it. If we go on a run where we're winning games, don't get carried away with yourself. Don't fall in love with yourself. And it also does the same when you're getting beat. Don't feel sorry for yourselves. Just find a way to get back winning, and we'll do that. I've no doubt we'll do it. And it's probably the best game to come now, really, because they're coming to town and they've got all the money, they've got all the players. So if anything, as a player, that should excite you and lift your foot play against some of the best in the comp. So it's probably coming at the right time. It could flip both sides. They could come on, and if they're on song, it's going to be a difficult day. But I just feel as though we need to raise our game, and to do that, I think you have to play a quality opposition, and they certainly are that.
They probably had the standout forwards in the match, but generally in the pack, set for set, it was like a normal game, really. It was more that when you had the ball, you just never really looked like breaking through, or even when you had a lot of pressure in the second half with the penalties, never really looked like scoring points. And where has that come from?
Don't know. Especially with the halves we've got and the outside backs we've got, we should be scoring points regular, and quite a lot of them, unfortunately, we're not doing. And we need to look at that, because we seem predictable at times, and we can't be like that. You've got to be, off the cuff quite a bit, so you get some opportunities to change things and make teams think. But I think we was just going side to side, and that's what we said at half time. We can't keep going side to side. We need to go direct and square up a little bit more, and we didn't. We had enough chances in the second half. When we score, and you just think, let's get another now, we'll be all right, and then they score. So yeah, just frustrating more than anything, because I know how much it hurts the players, and that's the bad side, because if it didn't hurt the players, then you've got the wrong players, but it does hurt the players. So yeah, really confusing today.
Did we see a little bit, the try that Matt Fleming scored is a little bit of the sort of play that you wanted to see, where you've got your pace, with all due respect to Jack Owens, probably hasn't necessarily got that in him to score from that sort of range anymore, and almost the sort of thing that you're trying to create, but then you go and score that try and then concede the silly one straight away.
Yeah, so like the reason we're moving him, Jack's a very skillful player, so he's a winger's dream if he's playing at centre, because he'll always get that quality. And he showed from the kick for Butter when they scored. But we just feel Flem's got a bit more pace now, and he's a bit more direct with his line when he's going through. So that was the reason in changing that. But then when we get that, you just think, right, let's kick on, and we just didn't. We put, I think, not the next set, the set after, we knocked on, or we lost ball and tackled one or two. So it was difficult. But yeah, we've got to go back to the drawing board and sort this out.
Yeah, I mean, where are you at with moving the squad? I know you made a few changes today. Obviously, Joe Lyons dropped out the 18, give you the extra middle on the bench. Looked like Mike backfire when Depp Patton had a little bit of a knock in the game there. But where are you at with that?
Well, them's the 18 we've got. That's it. That's the only fit bodies we've got at the minute. We didn't get anyone from Warrington this week. I asked quite a few clubs, to be honest, but the Super League's doing it tough. I think they've all got a lot of injuries. Yeah, we're just desperate to get bodies in, and it's just getting the right ones. It's all right bringing bodies in, but they've got to bring something to the team. We thought we had one over at line the next week, that week after, but that's fell through. Ryan Lanning pulled it this morning. His little lad's in hospital, so that was difficult. I think Nick Regson's back next week, but yeah, we're on the lookout. We just need that. With having four middles on bench, if you've Jack Owens' team, you can always jump at half, and Max Roberts can go at centre. So we always had that cushion if somebody was to get injured. But yeah, we desperately need some bodies and all that.
I thought Joe Bullock and Cavan Rothwell, I thought they were the best players for Barrow, both from Super League clubs, of course. And I suppose an example of what you're talking about, you need them players to come in from somewhere. Yeah,
I thought both the league kids did well, Brown and Rothwell, and Joe's Joe. We know what he's about. Carries a big body. And that's the worry for me today. We spoke at half time, and I challenged my middles. I said, "You're getting beat easy out there, and it's not acceptable." And I want to see a reaction. I thought there was a little bit of a reaction second half, but then it's just that last 10 minutes again when they get 2 or 3 tries and the score goes away from you. So, yeah, gutted. But yeah, we desperately need some better good luck, if that makes sense. Jordan Johnson's back training, so fingers crossed he could be 2 or 3 weeks. Fingers crossed.
What do you do looking ahead to Friday? Then are you hoping to have any more bodies Friday? And they've got a lot of ex-Widnes players in the team as well, so it'll be a big contest.
I think Nick Gregson's available. Ryan Lanner will be available. Joey Lyons will be available. And that's probably it, unless I get anybody in. I will be asking. I've just said in there now. I think we need not make people accountable, but make people know that if they perform like that, it's not acceptable. And there's a difference. They're knowing what's right and wrong. And I've just said to every player there, go home tonight and just be honest with yourself. And when you've got a minute, have a think, and you know yourself if you've done enough. Because I know for myself if I've done enough, and I've not done enough today, because we need to be better than that.
That was Allan Coleman then after a disappointing defeat for Widnes against Barrow. Mike is with me as normal. And, we missed the podcast last week. And I guess since we last did a podcast, things have sort of, not quite saying the wheels have come off, but they're certainly a bit loose at the moment in terms of Widnes after that defeat against York, which was a fairly humbling experience. York, obviously, were a much better team. Widnes didn't really turn up, but to them follow that up with the performance against Barrow has got Widnes in a bit of a sticky point. They lost 4 of the last 5 games now, which isn't a good place to be in by anyone's books.
Absolutely not. I think the York game, you could be forgiven for saying it wasn't our day. Mistakes ultimately got punished at near every given opportunity, and you go 16-0 down. You're asking for trouble. Quality all over the pitch. Powerful, dynamic forwards, solid halfbacks, experience, Paul McShane, etc., etc. What I wasn't quite prepared for was that game on Sunday against Barrow. You look at Barrow's team, Ryan Johnson not playing, and Ryan King as well, who I think highly of, not playing. And for me, we got beaten more or less every department. Experienced players making mistakes time and time again, ultimately, bringing pressure on yourself. And fundamentally, the biggest thing for me, you had forwards in the opposition's jersey running simply harder than you, being a bit more physical, wanting the game more. Things that we're not really used to speaking about Widnes of late. So that was the worrying signs for me. And then you compound that with for me, Brett Bailey should have got on the pitch a lot earlier, the way some of our middles was defending and certainly taking the ball in. I'm not saying that anybody, it's something that, massive alarm bells should be going at the moment. Certainly alarm bells, but it's not panic stations. But, Gav Benyon got run through twice, one on his inside and one was a very lackadaisical tackle. And he still played big minutes. And you've got Brett on the bench, a young, hungry forward. And I'm not saying it'd have changed the game or would have won the game, but when forwards are making mistakes like that and experienced ones, you might as well throw young Brett in to have a go and see what he can do and mix it up a bit. I think throughout the season, really, we've struggled to score points again at times and turn pressure into points when we've had it. For me, I was surprised Joe Lyons didn't get a crack on Sunday, and I think it's only fair he should be given a crack in his preferred position on Friday. Because one thing Joe does is he'll take the ball to the line a bit, and he's a bit of a quicker, fast-paced runner, and a bit of speed running at the line can create a different set of problems. And I think certainly speed is something that we've certainly lacked over the past couple of weeks. I think it'd be fair to say more than anything.
Yeah, I think I've noticed a few people have been talking about the halfbacks. I don't see that as the issue. Don't get me wrong. I don't think anyone's been pulling up trees. I actually think the problem with you sort of touched on it there, the pace. Widnes are missing pace, but I also think they're just missing a bit of strike out wide. Neither of the back rowers really. I think they're solid, but I don't think they're necessarily offering you a great deal of threat running out wide. And then the centres, probably likewise. I think Joe Edge had a good break in the first half, I think. But other than that, we didn't really see that. And I think it's partly to do with them not winning the battle in the middle. I think actually when Ryan Lannon doesn't play, I think Widnes are absolute. I think they're in a bad place when Ryan Lannon's not there. I think he makes a massive difference. I think Martin Riley was poor. I thought he was very poor. And I think he's been great, obviously, this season since he got back to fitness. But I think for someone who's he's vice captain or whatever he is, I think some of the things that he did were pretty ordinary. And I think
that offload before our time.
Yeah, if Widnes going at 12-6 at half time against Barrow, you probably dust yourself off and think we've probably got away with that a little bit there. There was no reason to do it, but even then, I think there was some poor knock-ons and poor decision making. I think the worrying thing is for me is I look at how Barrow played, and I look at their forwards, and they probably had 4, maybe 5 forwards that I would probably take at Widnes. So obviously Joe Bullock goes without saying. He's probably a bit of an anomaly because you wouldn't normally have someone like that. I thought he was excellent. The lad from Lee, Ryan Brown's from Lee as well. I thought he was solid. I thought Bedward, who's a pretty cheap pickup Barrow got last year. He was being at Midlands Hurricanes. He's not, he's probably someone who teams would target as a weak link. I thought he ran really strong. I think Ellis Robson's an excellent player. I've always thought he's an excellent player, and he provided some good footwork and good go forward when he got the chance. All of a sudden, you're starting to look at that team there, and you're thinking, actually, those 4/5 players, you could make a case for them getting into the Widnes team. And I think that's where Widnes have got some issues at the moment. I think the 13's fine, probably. But, and I know people are getting a little bit. I think people are getting a little caught up about the 3 players that Widnes have released. I don't think they will make any difference to how Widnes have been this season. With all due respect to Joe Lyons, I don't think Joe Lyons will make any difference to. I'm not saying that he wouldn't play, and I'm not saying he hasn't got something to offer. But I don't think that sorts the fundamental problems out. And it ultimately, Widnes haven't actually played brilliantly this season in any game, really, apart from the Warrington one, obviously. I think the other games they've just stuck in, and they've obviously lost a little bit of that in the last couple of weeks. And you can hear from Allan Coleman from the interview with him, he's scratching his head a little bit as well, because he doesn't quite know where it's where it's gone. There's a big game this Friday against Oldham, and then you go into York again, and if Widnes aren't careful, they could get on a little bit of a downward spiral from where they are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the middles of what you just said there at first, I think when we spoke about recruitment on here between me and you, I've hinted where I'd go for a middle or two. And I think sometimes when you're winning, things kind of get missed a bit. But apart from going to war to lose, and obviously elements of the Warrington game, that Sheffield game we won at home, we was heavily pinned in our own half, and Dex Patton's kicking game on the day, really got us out of trouble, and we scraped through and won the game. We all know what happened at Batley. I think Allan said essentially the forwards' engines blew up. Again at Doncaster, their forwards got on top of us. And then the last, against York and Barrow, I think Middles to come in and compete and offer something different. Absolutely. Totally agree with the two back rows. I like the two back rowers we've got. But I think ultimately you need a bit more competition there as well, because let's face it, them two players play every week and there's nobody really waiting in the wings to put pressure on the two.
Yeah,
Shirt off them or offer something different to adapt to a different style of opposition, for example. They're always just going to play the same way every week.
And you compare that to last season when you had Sam Wilde, who is a different sort of forward. He can take you forward on runs. He can take you in a different direction. And to be fair, Allan Coleman has hinted that there is that lack of competition for places, but then at the same time, how's it got to that point? I think clearly we'll go on to the Oldham game in a bit. Warrington are providing 5 dual reg players for this week's game, but I'm not particularly overly enamoured by any of them particularly. And when you compare that to some of the players that some of the other teams are getting, you just wonder. Widnes have got. It's almost as if like Widnes is a bad word, or like people don't want players to go to Widnes, or I don't know what it is, but I just feel like there's a little bit of that at the moment where the Kai Taylor-Ray situation is an interesting one. He comes in, plays at Doncaster. Probably Widnes don't win that game if he's not there. And then he doesn't get picked at York. I know Allan explained that he'd not trained in the week. He wasn't 100%, so they decided not to risk him. I think in hindsight, even probably Allan Coleman would admit that was maybe the wrong call. But then he didn't play last week because Warrington didn't make him available. He's played for Warrington reserves and he's got a bad hamstring injury. So he's going to be sidelined for quite a bit now. So whatever plan you had for potentially having him in the team, that's got to go out the window. But then also last week, I think Max Wood played for Warrington's reserves, I think, as well. There was a couple of them who played who you would get. And I think for whatever reason, Widnes just can't seem to make this loan dual reg thing work in their favour as much as maybe some of the other clubs can.
No.
And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there's an argument to be had that Widnes really ought to be trying to recruit their own players. And I think there's, clearly I don't know the ins and outs of it. Allan Coleman's clearly looking for them. Whether there's the budget there to do it, I don't know. But clearly getting players in is an issue.
Totally agree, mate. And giving a bit of, I suppose, fans' perspective on this, and not necessarily just my opinion, but other people that you speak to, just starting from the beginning and going, back to the lads who was released pre-season and obviously during as well, who played next to no games. I think where the fans' frustration comes in, where we know we're a club run on limited resources. There was mistakes in recruitment. Whatever way you look at it, they didn't work out. And if it's little or large amounts of money, if you're a club struggling, spending what you've got, essentially, it's wasted money. And then you've got this dual registration again, which we'll speak about this topic 3, 4, 5, 6 times again before the end of the season. We have never, this side of being relegated from Super League, we've never cracked the loan system. We just haven't. And history says that. And here we are again. And I don't know the answer to it. Is it Warrington? Is it Widnes? Is it both together? Is it the players that are on offer? Or is it something else? I don't know. But if this scenario keeps on happening, from a fan's perspective, you'd be thinking, well, if we are going to dual reg in the future, why not change the club that we're doing it with potentially and try something new?
I can't remember whether. Sorry, Mike. I can't remember if we touched on this in a recent one. I don't know whether I said I was actually surprised that Widnes stayed with Warrington.
The boat had been rocked last year after Dan Okoro played for Swinton. Let's have it right.
Yeah.
And it seemed to get better after that, in fairness, but Widnes wasn't happy.
But I think it only really got better because you basically got the guarantee that you'd have Lucas Green and Zach Bardsley row.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the alarm bells were already there when Bardsley Rowe was loaned to London at the start of the year. That straight away was me thinking, well, what's gone on there? He's already used to playing at Widnes. Clearly playing at Widnes is much more convenient than playing at London. I mean, even this weekend, Ben Harthill, who's is one of the 5 dual reg players, he was loaned to Swinton for the season. So you've got Swinton fans asking the question about, hang on, I thought he was with us for the whole season. Now, Harthill was a player that Allan Coleman actually mentioned after the pre-season friendly as someone who'd probably impressed him. And then within a week, he was on loan at Swinton and then wasn't an option. We had the Aidan Doolan situation where he was there. The club never really said that he wasn't there. And then all of a sudden he's getting injured on trial at Huddersfield and he's out for a little while. There's just a disconnect, I think. And that's before we even get on to what I believe is an ongoing issue where at this time of the year, Widnes have massive problems. And I can't think that it's anything other than the way that they handle the contract renewal situation. And I've seen a few comments on Facebook about, why are they giving the coach a new contract? Let's get it right. They have to give the coach a contract because players won't sign otherwise. They've got to engage players before May the 1st. I mean, in Super League now, it's even earlier. They've got to engage with players before May the 1st. Otherwise, they're on the open market. And so if you've not got your coach, and I know for a fact players have turned around and said, well, what's happening with Allan Coleman? Will Allan be here next year? Because until I know whether that's happening, I'm not necessarily going to sign. But for me, it's too much of a coincidence that this is happening year in, year out with different coaches, different players, different training regimes, that at this time of year, whatever they're doing under this regime at Widnes, it's not working and they're not addressing it.
You've got to look at that, haven't you? Because ultimately, we've had different coaches and gone through this. We've had a different set of core players and gone through this. So it can't be mentality, can't be training, and that is the common theme, isn't it? Really, it's the only thing that's left.
And Widnes were fortunate last year. The biggest result in Widnes' season last year was when they won away at York. If they hadn't won that game, which was, I think, the start of June or something like that, Widnes would have struggled to make the playoffs. Yeah. And that was after a run where they scraped past Doncaster at home, they'd drawn with Whitehaven at home. They'd managed to drag it out a little bit by getting past weaker teams by narrow scores. But I'm more than happy for someone to come to me and say, actually, this is the reason. But the more it's happening year in, year out, we'd just make a decent start to the season. And like I say, I acknowledge that this season they've not been playing as well as maybe they have done in previous seasons, but they'd still been getting results. It's just too much coincidence that February, March, hit the ground running, whatever, start really well. But then as soon as we get into this 3 or 4 week period where it's like the deadline for letting players know whether they're being engaged, it becomes an issue. Last year we saw issues with players who were told that they weren't being engaged, who then ended up leaving. Widnes are in that position now. If that happened this year, they'd be in a massive hole because they haven't got any. There's no movement really in the squad to enable that to happen. I think there was 18 on Sunday who didn't play. Lannon, Reece Williams, Gregson obviously banned, and then Jordan Johnson, Lewis Hall are obviously injured. So you've only got 5 other players who didn't play. And so if all of a sudden you decide, right, 2 or 3 of them we're not keeping, and then they decide to leave, you're down to next to nothing in reserve. So yeah, that frustrates me greatly because I feel like that must be that. I'd love for someone to turn around and say it's something different, but I just can't see any. I just can't see what alternative it would be. And I'm a bit like, how many times does it have to happen before it's changed?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, look, we might be jumping the gun, and a couple of different performances in the next couple of weeks could change things in the outlook massively. But right here, right now, saying it as it is, as a board, as coaching staff, as whoever's negotiating the contracts, to a degree, the players themselves, there's got to be conversations had of what happens year in, year out, certainly at board level, and looking at the patterns and how they've done things. Because at the end of the day, people on the board have been here throughout now to see whatever the processes are that they go through, and something does need to fundamentally change. Then going back to what I was saying before as well, another frustration of fans, and I've got to be honest here, I am definitely with this, and a little bit. Look, there's probably reasons to it, and nobody sets out to make mistakes or do a bad job or signings not to come off. But throughout the week, every week, you go on your phone on other clubs are signing players. They do. And all right, we've got dual reg and we've got 5 coming in, but they do everywhere you look every week, and it always seems to be us that struggles to make movement in the transfer market. And I just feel like, say, it's a massive frustration, and people are paying into VIPs which is a great run thing by the volunteers, but to get more volunteers, you're fielding 16 players of your own plus dual reg, and you want people signing up to that to help support the club. And we're led to believe post-match our signings fell through that we thought we had close to over the line as well. You throw that into the mix, and again, you've got to look why us when other sides are making movement. And I do sympathise, especially with people who pay into VIPs, and then you've got players leaving before that hasn't really kicked the ball either. That's people's extra money going towards them contracts. Do you know what I mean? I do, from that point of view, I see people's frustration in terms of the recruitment.
I mean, I think the other thing, and I suppose it depends which side of the fence you land on with this. The club obviously raised some money from playing Warrington. Now, it strikes me that that's probably just gone towards, sustaining the costs that were already there. But when you think, right, well, 3 players have gone, you've got a little bit of extra cash from the cup game, but you've not seen anything coming in. I think probably people rightly get a little bit frustrated at that. Like I say, I've seen a few people on Twitter being losing their heads about the 3 players that are released. Listen, and I've said it already, but I think people are getting hung up on that too much. I think that's not. I don't necessarily think that that's the issue. Them players, if they were good enough, they would be in the team. I think the issue is more, why can't Widnes get in the market for better caliber players that would actually make a difference.
And it's
And
frustrating. It's frustrating as well, mate, because you look at Dan Murray and Ryan Lannon, who we've already spoke about Ryan Lannon and the impact he has. And I agree with you. He's a massive miss in the middle because he skittles a few and he attracts defenders. And they're two mid-season signings that give you an extra boost and a lift. So everybody knows and can see how much of a difference it does make.
yeah, and I think the other thing that people are getting a bit caught up on is the squad size. I don't actually think that's the big issue either, because look, Halifax have only got 20 of their own players. They've got 20 players, and they've just got Tom Whitehead on loan from Warrington. I think Jack Hanson's injured, but it's not about the squad size. It's not about having 25 players. You don't need 25 players. It's not about having 28 players, whatever. It's about having players that are good enough to make you better than you already are. And I think that goes back to the cynic within me feels like Widnes of the last couple of seasons, they've signed players for signing players' sake to get the squad number up to try and appease the fans. I 100% think they did it last season. He was a lad from Wigan who came, he was at Salford now, he went to Salford in the end. There was a lot. The two lads. The what?
No, he was
it was Harvey, someone, wasn't it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I forget his name.
The lad from Wigan. Sorry, I thought you meant Charlie McCurry, who was on. He was
Well,
on.
I mean, McCurry's
Harvey Wilson. That's the lad's name.
Harvey Wilson. But then the two lads from Warrington, Whitehead and Lucas Green, who were basically part of the squad, got squad numbers, whatever. They were training, and then we never seen them. The cynic within me feels like that there are signings like that being made because fans are asking questions when there's only 2021 in the squad, and they sort of are filler signings just to get your numbers up, without them really having any big impact on whether it's going to improve the squad or not. That's probably me being a bit too cynical, to be perfectly honest. But I think that's. And I think so, and that goes back to the squad size thing. I think you don't need a big squad with filler players. I'd much rather have less players but have better quality players. And you mentioned Dan Murray and Ryan Lannon. The reason why they were good signings is because they were better than what was already there. Is Adam Jones isn't a better centre than Joe Edge. Adam Jones isn't a better centre than Matt Fleming. That's it. Do you know what I mean? And that's the Regan Sumner is not a better winger than the three wingers Widnes have got. Cameron Brown isn't a better fullback than Jack Owens. He's not even a better fullback than Matt Fleming, in my opinion. So, them players, as much as everyone's saying, "Oh, they should have got a chance," and you're right in what they say. You're right in what you say about, well, why sign them in the first place. There's also that element of the coaches want to develop players as well. That's what being a coach is about. But of course, the financial reality of the game at the moment probably means that it's not possible. I'm sure Allan Coleman's probably looked at Adam Jones and thought, well, if I can get into him, train him for a year or two, he can be me starting centre next year or the year after that. But because of the nature of, I think it's probably a rugby league. It is the rugby league, the nature of rugby league at the moment. You can't sort of do that like the Super League clubs can. Like Noah Booth is an example that Hull KR signed from Wakefield, who scored a couple of tries against Widnes for Hunslet. He's just gone to Featherstone on loan because Hull KR are, he's on a 4-year deal there. They're obviously thinking he'll play Super League for them in a few years, so they can develop him like that. Whereas if you're at Widnes, if you're the coach of Widnes, you haven't really got the luxury of being able to do that. And I think that's where the conflict falls between sort of signings like that, fans asking questions, and squad size and things like that. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and do you know what, James, as well? Like, you are right, but also people make mistakes, don't they, in any business, any walk of life. And if you ask the club and maybe even Allan for the next year, obviously there was a philosophy and an ethos to bring these obviously players in, and for it to be successful in the ways you've just spoke about. That was clearly the idea. And it will probably be different next year because of the experience that we've had, because it's not been successful. My viewpoint on it, just to finish, is I just have preferred that them 3, 4, whatever players, we'd have had one quality player rather than them 3 or 4, money accumulated, or 2, or whatever that may be that you can afford. I think that's the route for me.
Yeah, I mean,
More, like you say, not focusing on the squad size as much. Just get as much quality in as you can afford.
I suppose the few responses to that are, well, there might not have been the quality player in replacement. They did bring in Reece Williams, to be fair. I think another side to it is, in an ideal world, you would loan. We touched upon this, didn't we, when it first happened? In an ideal world, if you were trying to develop players like that, you'd have them on 2-year deals and you'd be trying to loan them out. But such is the nature of the market at the moment, is it's difficult for Widnes to loan players out to, say, Rochdale or Keighley or whatever, because they're actually getting players from Super League clubs. And because you can only carry so many loan players, it's like, well, if Warrington are going to offer you a winger and a centre who are both full-time, they're both 18, 19, in the academy, are you going to take them? Probably have to pay them less because Warrington probably give them you for free. Or are you going to take 2 part-time lads from Widnes who've got jobs in the day, and you probably have to contribute to the match pay or the wages or whatever? And I think that's another side of things that it doesn't add up for clubs in Widnes's position to be able to do it that way. I think I'd like to speak to Kyle Eastman at Halifax, because I'd be really interested to see how they're shaping up, because Halifax have ran with reserves in previous years, so they have ran with lots of bodies in previous years, but it sounds like this year they've really sort of, they had financial problems, didn't they? So it's probably been more of a necessity than anything else, but it appears to be working, whatever they've adopted this year. And listen, it might be a fluke, it might just be this, it's only been a couple of months. You could make the same point about Widnes at points last year, that Widnes were in a good place, but I think the whole player thing is a battle, but I think the bottom line is at the moment, Widnes it's not quite adding up for Widnes like it is for some of the other clubs, as you already said.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree. I mean, like say, Kyle Eastman at the moment, you've got to look at him, haven't you? They're cooking on gas and they can't do anything wrong, and there's no squad depth there, and they're getting quality in the loan market to top up what they've got that, we've seen already. Players like Conrad Urrell, it's adding to them, you're not sending in players who are if buts and maybes, you're getting proven quality at time to go with what you've got. I will still say with Halifax, they're running relatively injury-free with the situation. But still, fundamentally, you've got to give them credit and look at it, if it continues throughout the season, of a new way of looking at things for the championship.
I think the thing is, though, is you get an injury, that's where you go into, that's where it then becomes, right, you knock on Warrington's door and you say, can we have Tom Whitehead for a month on loan because such a body's injured, and we can guarantee he's going to play every week because our lad's injured. Whereas I think some clubs are approaching it like the dual reg and loan players should enhance their existing squad. And I think it's clear that doesn't work, because naturally you want to pick your own players. But then from a Warrington or whoever's point of view, they want their players to play. And that's obviously, that's generally what happened with Lucas Green at the start of last season, where it was like Widnes weren't picking him and Warrington were like, well, hang on, we need to loan him somewhere else because we need him to play games. And it only really worked when Widnes were short enough to say that, well, we can guarantee that Lucas Green's going to play every week because we haven't actually got anybody else. I think that's another side to it. It's a funny one. I think it's worth noting as well, Widnes without Jordan Johnston, who was the best player last season. I think the Jake Mason situation has clearly hampered Widnes as well. If you think he was the superstar back signing that Widnes were making, I think if you look at that Widnes team and you had Jake Mason playing fullback and Jordan Johnson playing loose forward on Sunday just gone, I don't think the scoreline is what it was. And so I think I have a little bit of sympathy in terms of how them two situations have developed. But things like that, I suppose, are always going to happen.
Yeah, that's it. And, with the same token, Barrow was carrying injuries to key players as well. So injuries are a part of the game and, you've got to deal with them. As much as I agree, you put them two players in, quite frank, any championship side and they enhance all of them, in my opinion. But going back to the game and stuff and where we was tripping up all the time, it was just not learning from your mistakes either, do you know what I mean? And then getting some leadership in there and, the experienced players, like I say, your Martin Rileys, your Jack Owens, failing to calm everybody down and stop the mistakes. And, the try right on half time at York killed us, even though we shouldn't have been 16-0 down. And then you go and do it again against Barrow. And we've rode our luck, haven't we? Even when we've been winning games, we've rode our luck. Let's face it, and we don't seem to be learning of if you keep making mistakes, fundamental mistakes like that, you will be punished by well drilled sides.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned about the York one, the kick. It was a kick. It was running it on the last, wasn't it, and then kicking it, and it was charged down, and York ended up getting really good field position, and that's what they scored from. I partly wonder whether is it a case of too many cooks at times? Maybe. Clearly, when Joe Lyons is playing, there's a clear hierarchy in the halves where it's Tom Gilmore's calling the shots and Joe Lyons is support man. Similar to the Super League days when you had Kevin Brown was calling the shots and Joe Mellor was doing the running and the probing and stuff. I wonder, is there a little bit of a breakdown in that situation because you've got Deck Patton and Gilmore, and there's a bit of, who's the senior one of the two? We're not sure. Then you're putting Jack Owens is in the mix a little bit because he's being played in the centres and being given this playmaking role. Is there a little bit of that? I don't know.
I know you what you were saying. It looks like he's going to probably get his chance, Joey, on Friday. And I know I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying that Deck Patton's the problem. I am definitely not on that bus because of his kicking game. I just feel putting Joey in now, he'll add a bit of pace into the backs a little bit in terms of taking the ball to the line, not necessarily breaking through and going 80 metres, but it's a different way of playing. He's got a far better running game than the other two. And I just feel like as well sides, because we've lined up with Gilmore and Patton up until this point, maybe we're getting fundamentally found out as well on video analysis, by other sides, learning how to play, maybe just a little bit of a change. I'll just essentially, flip it and change it up a bit and be a little bit more unpredictable. That said, if we make the same mistakes against Oldham as what we've been doing the last couple of weeks without Deck Patton's long kicking game, you're probably be in deeper trouble because him at times with the boot has got us out of trouble when we've been in our own 20 or 30 after a 5-tackle set.
Yeah. Let's look ahead to this Oldham game then and look at the squad. You mentioned Joe Lyons there. I wonder whether there's an argument that Joe Lyons might be selected at fullback.
Possibly.
Because the squad's out, obviously, if Good Friday means the squad's out a bit early. Matt Fleming has got a hamstring injury. Deck Patton has got an ankle injury, so they're both missing. Reece Williams is missing. Ryan Lannon's still missing. Max Roberts is out with a knee injury as well. Nick Gregson's back from his ban. So the squad is Jack Owens, Ryan Ince, Joe Edge, Mike Butt, Joe Lyons, Tom Gilmore, Dan Murray, Martin Riley, Rodri Lloyd, Danny Langtree, Matty Fozzard, Liam Bent, Liam Kirk, Nick Gregson, Gavin Benyon, Brett Bailey, And then the 5 dual reg players from Warrington, I think only 4 can play, but I'm not 100% sure on that rule. Ben Hartill, who's a hooker, Luke Thomas, who's a prop, Nolan Tapia is a back rower, really, probably could play in the centres. Ollie Leyland, a half-back, and then Zach Gardner, who's actually the son of Adi Gardner, the former St Helens man. He's an outside back. So they're the 5 players that Widnes have got on dual reg this week. The only reason I say about Lions maybe being the fullback option is because of Ollie Leyland. You would think if Warrington have made him available, they're probably going to be expecting him to play. I mean, he could play fullback, I suppose. But then also, the other thought process from my point of view was there's a dearth of centres. I suppose Zach Gardner might be in contention to play centre. I'd expect maybe Owens will play at centre. Which then means obviously you need someone to play at fullback. But I don't know what you think about that, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if Joe Lyons goes to fullback. I mean, I actually had a brief conversation with somebody about this of the backs before we come on, and I'm just thinking if Joe Lyons is fullback, you'd obviously have Edge and Owens then in the centres. That means likely the 2 outside backs for Warrington and miss out. You're saying that one of them can play back row. Maybe he'd then come off the bench, perhaps, and then that'd be the one that'd drop out, and that'd allow Ollie Leyland to slot in, or at fullback, or whichever way round you play Lyons and Leyland. Potentially, that'd be the route then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Gardner played centre for Keighley. Not Sunday, just gone the Sunday before. He played centre for them against Swinton. Tapia has played a couple of games for Keighley this season in the back row. I mean, clearly there's options. Clearly there's options that they could maybe do. Like you say, it might just be a case of Joe Lyons comes back on the bench and Leyland plays halfback and Jack Owens plays fullback. I suppose you could make the case that, well, if Hartill's there, he might be on the bench because he's going to be the interchange hooker.
Yeah.
Which then,
I'll be honest, James. If it was me, I'd keep it a little bit simple and just put Jack at fullback, Lyons in the halves, and go with Gardner in the centre, because I believe he's got a bit of pace as well. That's just me. I just think, it's a short turnaround as well, and integrating 4 players potentially into your team that haven't probably really trained with you a great deal before. If you start shuffling around too much, it could go bad to worse to catastrophic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I think certainly that's a good argument in terms of, play who you know sort of thing. So get Joe Lyons in at standoff with Tom Gilmore and keep Owens at the back, and listen, let's get it right. And this might be part of the problem when it comes to dual reg, is that Widnes can't pick a team to pander to Warrington's needs. They've got to pick a team that's right for Widnes's needs. Leyland played a handful of games, I think, for London Broncos at fullback in his time there, so he might be a consideration for fullback, maybe. But maybe they need to stick to basics. Owens at 1, Lyons and Gilmore in the halves, and then like you say, put Gardner in at in its centre. But it'd be interesting to see how it all comes together. The good news is that Oldham's squad doesn't have Nene McDonald in.
Starting with a positive, eh?
Yeah. He joined them on loan from Salford because of Salford's ongoing salary cap nonsense. But I think his wife's having a baby or something, so he's had to go. He's gone back to Australia, which means he's missing. So Oldham's 21-man squad has got 9 former Widnes players in. Danny Craven, Gil Dudson, Owen Farnworth, Adam Lawton, Jay Chaplow, Pat Moran, Ted Chaplow, Jack Johnson, and then Tom Forber is the other one who played a handful of games for Widnes. What's interesting about Tom Forber is Widnes actually tried to sign him recently on loan from Wigan, and were basically told he wasn't available, and then he went, and then a few days later he was on his way to Oldham. So that's another one, another example of something not quite adding up from a recruitment point of view. For Widnes, they have got a few injuries, Oldham. They've got a few missing, but they've still got a pretty strong squad. They've got Jordan Turner's in there, Riley Dean, Matty Ashurst, Adam Milner, Josh Drinkwater, Phoenix Lollytogger guy. It's going to be a tough one for Widnes, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, looking at the squad list more to the top, the layout of Oldham have named it. There's a lot of, well, say a lot. There's a core group of 4 or 5, isn't there, where they're experienced players that probably don't have a long left in their careers, but right now seem to be doing the business and know how to play the game, and it's working for them. Then you've got the Widnes X contingents that are going to have a massive point to prove and smell blood. Let's have it right. Some of them have been called out over the past 18 months, 24 months by people we've had at the club and saying the reasons why they'd left, even though there was some of them really popular with Widnes fans. And to a degree, I understood some of the decisions. I think we spoke about it before. Others, you scratch your head a little bit and think they should be players you want to keep hold of and progress. So they're gonna be turning up, firing on all cylinders, and then you've got like your Tom Forbes, who I think's a fantastic player. To be honest, he's a player that excites me, and he's knocking on the door of Super League. I think he'll be a really good player for years to come. And then you've got like pace out the back with QLT's son. He's been picking up some headline breaks and tries. They've got quality, haven't they? They've got quality, and I think Oldham, when you look at a lot of the scores, they're probably very different to us in the sense of when we've been winning games, we won't score many, but we'll defend very well. Where Oldham have, in games where you'd say they've struggled potentially, they've got out of jail by scoring a lot of points. They play Featherstone at the weekend, 30-28, where the way Featherstone have been playing, you'd have expected Oldham to take them to the sword. It wasn't to be, but they've still managed 30 points. And that's the beauty of having tries in your team and a bit of pace out the back and a bit of, strike like your Adam Lawton's, where he can... Look, we all know what Adam Lawton's faults are, but his strengths, he can score a try, nobody else can. And they've got about 3 or 4 players in that team that can do the same thing in different ways. So I think that's where Oldham are, going really well at the moment. They've got that strike, and they know they've got the strike even when they're struggling. So it's gonna take a monumental 80 minutes, mate. And ultimately, bottom line for me, and I'm not getting at anybody because we've only lost 2 games. Nobody's a bad team in 2 weeks, and nobody's a bad player in 2 weeks, and nobody's a bad coach in 2 weeks. But fundamentally, if you serve up what you did at Barrow, it won't be 37 points. It'll be 60s. So that's it, really. We've got to turn up. Whatever 17's selected, their heads have got to be switched on. Not only be trying to run it in with a bit more conviction and tackling a bit harder and all them little 1%ers. You've got to be switched on and not making these fundamental mistakes in your own 30-metre line. It will absolutely kill you on Friday if you do it.
Yeah, I think the ex-Widnes contingent at Oldham, like I say, I still don't understand why. Certainly Owen Farmer, Adam Lawton would still be at Widnes if I was in charge. as an absolute minimum. And obviously, some of the others, to be fair, the Chapel Hours and Jack Johnson, their circumstances were a lot different. But certainly, it felt like Farmworth and Lawton were players that would have stayed if they would have stayed around if Widnes had have kept them around, if that makes sense. And I think you'll probably see players like them have really good games at the on Friday. Before we sign off, let's catch up on our predictions. Obviously, we missed last week. We both got 3 out of 4 in the 80-95 Cup. So we're on 25 all for this season. What are the games this week? I think everyone's playing Friday this week.
Apart from Toulouse. I mean, how ironic's that? The one full-time team over the short turnaround gets the week off, but there we go.
Yeah. Batley, it's Batley Hunslet on. That's 1 o'clock because surely they've worked out now that it's not going dark before 5, but they're kicking off at 1 o'clock.
Batley and who was that? Sorry, Batley and
it's Batley and Hunslet.
Batley and Hunslet. Look, I don't really have a lot more to say at the moment with Hunslet. I think they're struggling. The pack size was a problem coming into the championship for me, and it's not been rectified. And as the games go on, I just see it getting a bit worse. They've tried to get a couple of signings in, like Lee Gaskell, but ultimately the one player who was standing out was Noah Booth. He scored about 3, 4, 5 full-length tries, and they've lost him. And I just see it getting a bit tough, and Batley are just a well-drilled championship side. I can't see anything more than a convincing Batley win myself.
Barrow, London, I'm going Barrow.
Yeah, Barrow at home, aren't they? But, well, we've seen him play a heck of a long way for London to travel, just not firing on all cylinders. Yeah, Barrow for me.
Doncaster. This is an interesting one. Is Doncaster against Sheffield, because Doncaster are a bit hit and miss at the moment. They beat Toulouse at home, but then got absolutely trolleyed last week by York. I'm going to back Doncaster though to beat Sheffield.
This is spooking me, this one, because I bottled it when I should have said Doncaster to win. And then a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, in the 80-95 Cup, I backed Doncaster to beat Sheffield, and they didn't. So it spooked me, this one, a bit. Yeah. I think without looking at... I've not looked at the two squads with this one, I've got to be honest. But, yeah, there's something not quite right at Sheffield. And, of course, York, Doncaster, so you could say the same there. But I just think they've got a bit of, when they're on song, they've got a bit of a vicious forward pack, Doncaster, and if the backs can click, they can cause some damage. So, yeah, I'll follow suit with that, with Doncaster.
Right, my big call is I'm going to tip Bradford to beat Halifax at Halifax.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the game where maybe Halifax, whereas everyone's, no one's got expectations of them. I feel like it's such a big game that all of a sudden all eyes are going to be on them, and I just think Bradford will turn them over. I'll probably be wrong, but that's what I'm going with.
I looked at this before, and I'm not just saying this because you've just said it, James. I can't for the life of me sit here and see Bradford losing 3 games at this stage. I think, or they should, I think alarm bells definitely would be going at Odsal if they lost this game. Not more so for who they're playing, but crikey, if you're spending what they've got and they've got the aspirations of Super League and you've already lost 2, you've got to get up for this game against a bit of a local derby against an unbeaten side, spending a fraction of what you are. I think as well. Is this one at the Shea?
It's at the Shea. Yeah.
I think that actually suits Bradford more. I think in some ways Odsal can restrict Bradford in some ways in terms of playing them, unleashing the outside backs that they've actually got. So yeah, a narrow Bradford win. But
I'm got Widnes Oldham. I'm going reverse psychology, and I'm going to tip Oldham to win.
Yeah. Look, without being too disrespectful. I mean, last time I was in a similar position, I backed against Widnes with Toulouse, and that absolutely did happen. The past 2 weeks and how tired we've looked since that Warrington game, and another short turnaround, and 4 lone players coming into the mix against what's been branded as the millionaires coming to town, with players coming back with a point to prove. I know Allan said it can go both ways, and it certainly can. I just can't. I can't see it myself. I'd love to see it, but I've got to go with an Oldham win. And I've got to be honest, I am a little bit bothered about Friday. To be honest, I am a little bit nervous of what's gonna come out of that game, but we will see.
And then the final game is Featherstone against York, which is a 6 o'clock kickoff. If you get your foot down, you might make it if you leave early. If you leave Widnes Oldham early.
Yeah, I'm I'm going to go for York, and I think York are picking up ahead of Esteem now. We've seen the quality of York. I do believe kind of going probably back on a little bit of what I've just said about the Oldham and Widnes game. I think I don't think that's necessarily a sign of like Featherstone particularly improving. It could be, and I could be proven wrong this weekend against York. But I'm going for York, and I think in terms of Featherstone, there's still issues there that they're working through, and I just feel personally York, despite the start of the season, I just think they're a fantastically balanced side with a fantastic coach. So I'm going for York.
Yeah, it's interesting that York are definitely going to put themselves in. I know there's all this fuss going on about Super League, but because York are going to be up there, they'll always put themselves in contention for the Super League conversation, because if, everyone wants a team there anyway because it's a city, it's nice to go on the weekend. But if York are always there or thereabouts at the top of the championship, it's very hard to ignore them. And I think that's something that Widnes are really missing out. And I think Widnes have got deficiencies in some areas. But if Widnes were always a top 2, top 3 in the championship, it'd make them a lot hard. It'd make them a lot harder to be ignored. And so I think York have got that. They've almost got that nailed to a T now, that they're going to be like, right, we're going to be up there in the top 2 or 3. We want to be the team that's waiting for Salford or whoever to drop out, so we can take the baton on. Mike, thanks for your company as always, and enjoy. Hopefully it'll be an enjoyable Easter weekend, and we'll see you next week.